Today we're going to be reviewing and comparing every single Razer Kraken headset. And if at any point during the video you want to check out any of these Razer headsets, there's Amazon links below for the US, UK, Canada, and international links, but let's get into it. Now, the OG Kraken comes in at a price tag of $79.99, but it's pretty typically on sale for around $44.99. Now, even on the cheapest Razer headset that they sell, the build quality is surprisingly good. Thick metal bands carry onto a ring around the earmuffs. A faux leather top band looks and feels good. The earmuffs are a faux leather exterior with a fabric interior. And overall, from a glance and a pickup, this does feel like a much more expensive headset than it is. Now, sound quality on the OG Krakens is pretty much what you would expect. Bass is actually not bad. It does have some bass, but the mids and the trebles are a little bit muddy. This can be remedied pretty easily by getting an EQ software and pulling down those mids as they are a little bit over boosted. Overall, these are the worst sound quality of the Krakens, and I think the worst sound quality in Razer's entire lineup, but they still should be considered because if they go on sale more than their typical sale price, these can be a great pickup. Now, as far as sound quality with gaming performance, while this is far from my favorite headset to listen to music in, gaming on these is very enjoyable. Directional sound is quite easy to tell where footsteps or gunfire or really anything else is coming from. As far as the emotional side of gaming, having a richer, fuller bass would help, but again, for the price, this is a really good gaming experience, and that's really all you can ask for. As for controls, on the cable, there is a mic mute switch and a volume wheel. And for connectivity, there is a non-detachable 3.5mm jack for connection. Now, comfort on the OG Krakens is actually pretty dang good. I can comfortably wear these for long gaming sessions all day, 8 hours without fatigue. These have very, very large ear cups that spread out the weight nicely. They don't press too hard against your head, making for a very comfortable headset. That being said, the seal isn't that great because they are so comically large that even though it's comfortable, it kind of doesn't count because it's not really the best design. That seal is just not great, and that does take away from the sound quality for sure. Now let's talk mic quality. The OG Razer Kraken has a surprisingly good mic. This is definitely an L for Razer, and you'll see why, because this mic is so good, and a lot of their headsets that are in the much more expensive price points aren't as good as this mic. But don't take my word for it. Take a listen to the mic test. Check, check, check. This is the mic test of the Razer OG Kraken. And that is how it sounds. Again, remember, at the end of the Kraken section, we're gonna go through all of the Krakens back to back, so stick around for that. Now, as for compatibility, since this is a 3.5mm connection, this is compatible with PC, Mac, PlayStation, Xbox, Switch, and, well, all your mobile devices, but if you're using like phones these days, you're gonna need a dongle. But with that, let's move up the lineup to the Razer Kraken V3X. Now, all of the previous variants except the OG Kraken are not sold anymore. So the V3 series is the only series besides the OG Kraken that you can still buy. The V3X comes in at $69.99. And if you're unaware, an X in the Razer lineup means that it is the budget variant of a line. So the X means cheaper, and things like Pro or other names mean it's upgraded. Okay, so build quality here looks like the other Kraken V3 lineup, but it does not share the overall design. That is pretty important because from a glance, especially online, this looks exactly the same. It is not. The materials here are significantly cheaper, being almost entirely made of plastic. Even the bands are plastic here. That being said, this doesn't feel like it's going to break. It does feel sturdy, just not as nice as the rest of the V3 lineup. Only on the V3X, you get longer, thinner interior earmuffs rather than the more rounded, wider interior earmuffs that you'll find on the Kraken V3, V3 Hypersense, and V3 Pro Hypersense. The earmuffs share a similar design with the original Krakens, with a faux leather exterior on the earmuffs and a fabric interior. Although the foam on the V3Xs is significantly more plush than on the OG Krakens. However, the RGB is shared amongst the V3 lineup and makes this look a lot more expensive on the Xs. So all of that RGB in the ear cups is going to be the same no matter what Kraken you get, which is a nice little touch. Now, sound quality on the V3Xs is a massive upgrade from the original Krakens. These stay in line with the Kraken lineup with a very balanced sound profile. When compared to the original Krakens, they shave off 90% of the muddiness, add good but balanced bass, and offer good mids and clear trebles, although slightly overboosted really at that upper end of the frequency range. However, these have one problem that makes this pretty hard for me to recommend to anyone, and this is the fitment. On both small and larger heads, both extended and non-extended, the bottom of the ear cups do not seal. This allows, especially for lower frequency bass, to escape, making for sound quality that just could be a lot better. This is not the driver's fault, this is the fitment fault. Now, gaming performance on the V3Xs is much crisper when compared to those OG Krakens, giving a even better directional sound with footsteps, and those finer sounds are easier to perceive directionally. However, the OG Krakens do better with bass. Again, this is probably due to the poor fitment, or absolutely due to the poor fitment. This really does detract from the overall headset. Now, as for controls, on the left ear cup, there is a mic mute button and a volume wheel. For connectivity, this is wired with a non-detachable USB, type A, that is. Comfort on the V3Xs is the worst of the Krakens, and this may actually be the worst of any Razer headset, at least a modern Razer headset. This is mainly due to that design flaw of having the bottom of the ear cups open and not resting against your skull correctly. This adds uneven pressure to the top of the earmuff. That being said, this is not uncomfortable by any means, but it just could be a lot better, and it's kind of something that just bugs me. The earmuffs are significantly plusher than on the OG Krakens, and across the board, all of the Krakens are very comfortable. Comfort should not even be a deal breaker for any of the Krakens, as they're very good. And honestly, Razer just kills it with comfort. Now, the mic quality on the V3Xs is the same as the Kitty V2s, which we'll talk about next. And they're actually the second best of the Kraken lineup. But take a listen for yourself to the mic test. Check. This is the mic test of the Razer Kraken V3 X. And that is how it sounds. As for compatibility, because this is using a USB Type A, it's compatible with PC, Mac, and PlayStation. But with that, let's move on to the Kraken Kitty V2s. These come at a price tag of $99.99, not on sale. And in most ways, these are almost identical to the V3Xs, so we'll kind of run through this a little bit quicker. The build quality on the Kitty V2s is identical in most ways to the V3Xs. The bands are totally plastic, just like the V3Xs. The leather and fabric earmuffs are exactly the same. The top band is exactly the same. Next to the adjustable bands, there is a gloss section instead of a brushed section. But besides that, and obviously the light up kitty ears themselves, this is essentially the exact same. However, very interestingly enough, this fixes the design flaw on the V3Xs. The kitty ears slightly changed the design to a more rounded profile, making the bottom of the earmuffs fully seal properly. Not only this, but for some reason, the ear cups just swivel a little bit more than they do on the V3Xs. Very strange that between those two, this solves that issue. But if you put them on one after the other, it is incredibly obvious. So very interesting, but the Kitty V2s are far better than the V3Xs. Now, the sound quality here is pretty much exactly the same as the V3Xs, but it solves that fitment issue, fully sealing around your ear due to more rounded, wider headband, and this makes for good trebles and mids like they were, but now significantly better bass than the V3Xs, even though they're the overall same drivers. That fitment, that seal, increases the bass. This is very apparent. If you ever have a headset that doesn't seal, just make it seal and you'll feel that bass just come to life. So very interesting there. Now, gaming performance, like the V3Xs, the directional sound is great with those very crisp sounds being easily heard, but now offering even better directional sound because of that seal, and just better bass response is nicer for that emotional side. This just shows the importance of a good fitment in a gaming headset. Now, as for the controls, this is the same as the V3X with a mic mute switch and a volume wheel on the left ear cup. Connectivity is also the same with a non-detachable USB Type A. Now, as for comfort, the Kitty V2s press slightly harder than the V3Xs, but that's not a problem at all because they do not press very hard, like in the whole grand scheme of things, and they're a very comfortable headset and way more comfortable than the V3Xs because of that correct seal. Very good. The mic quality here is the same as the V3Xs, so take a listen to the mic test. Check. This is the mic test of the Razer Kitty V2. And that is how it sounds. As for compatibility, this is compatible with PC, Mac, and PlayStation. But with that, let's move on to the Kraken V3. Now, this comes in at a price tag of $99.99. This is where the Kraken lineup switches to, well, the newer style of build quality, the more premium style of build quality that the rest of the line shares. So the V3s basically share its build quality with the V3 Hypersense and the V3 Pro Hypersense. The bands become solid metal that goes halfway around the ear cups and feels very high quality and durable. This is a big point that is super, super nice. Fabric and foam is on the inner headband with plush leather on the top of the headband. The ear cups themselves are plastic, and it does share that RGB like on the entire Kraken V3 lineup. The build quality here is identical on the Hypersense version. However, the sound quality is definitely not. So the Hypersense version of the V3 is not just a haptics, it doesn't just add haptics. It adds quite a bit more. So sound quality on the Kraken V3s is overall slightly less bassy than the Kitty V2s, but has much better trebles and mids, making for a clearer, cleaner audio experience. Overall, the sound quality is quite good, but I personally do prefer a little bit more bass. This obviously can be tuned in Razer Synapse, and once tuned, this sounds quite good and much better than the Kitty V2s. Also, just to note is mainly across the board, Razer has a very balanced sound profile. They typically do not overboost bass like some other headsets will. They like to stay in that middle ground. Now, as far as gaming performance, the V3's directional sound is awesome. The crisp sounds really come to life here, just a little bit more than the Kitty V2s, and add that level of emotion. Overall, this is as good as you'll ever need in game, but the Hypersenses, even without the Hypersense haptics enabled, it just takes it to the next level, and that's really where I think the sweet spot is. Now, as for controls, this has a mic mute button and a volume wheel on the back of the left ear cup, but then this adds a detachable mic, which is a nice touch. This is also, again, wired with a USB Type-A. Now, comfort on the Kraken V3s is going to be the same on the V3 Hypersense. So this verdict on comfort goes for both. The earmuffs are very plush. They fit around my larger ears perfectly, the seal is perfect, and they don't press too hard against my head at all, and that's even when wearing glasses. The top band is exactly what it should be. It's nice and plush, but not too soft as to not add support. I don't think anyone will have complaints with the V3 or the V3 Hypersense's comfort. It's very good. Now, mic quality on the V3s is just mid. For some reason, the more you spend on the Kraken lineup, the worse the mic gets, but don't take my word for it. Take a listen to the mic test. Check, check, check. This is the mic test of the Razer Kraken V3. And that is how it sounds. Now, for compatibility, because it's using that USB, this is compatible with PC, PlayStation, and Mac. But with that, let's talk about the Kraken V3 Hypersense. This comes in at a price tag of $129.99. So for that money, what are you getting more? Well, the build quality, like I said, is the same, but the two things that this mainly upgrades is better drivers and haptics. And in my personal opinion, this is for sure worth only $30 over the typical V3s. Not that the V3s are bad, but the Hypersenses are just that much better. Sound quality here really enters into the great quality segment. This gives significantly better low frequency or bass response and even clearer mids and trebles without being overboosted at all. The sound here is full and clear and the best sound quality out of the entire Kraken lineup. The Hypersense has those titanium drivers, which really do add that depth and clarity to the sounds that are very hard to hear with other drivers on all the other Krakens. Now let's talk gaming performance, because if you want the best overall gaming experience, the Hypersenses is where it's at. This is a very clean and clear gaming experience. Directional sound is unbelievably good. This also accentuates those very small sounds, like small clicks with your guns or when you're reloading them, sounds that you really can't hear on other headsets, and increases the immersion in-game to a large degree. Not even to mention that it has just deeper bass, which just gets that emotion going. But now let's talk about the Hypersense side of this, which if you don't know, it's haptics. It's going to be vibrations that kind of punch your ears without being loud, if that makes sense. So it's feeling that adds to the headset. Now, this has 3 levels of Hypersense. The first level only really reacts with those very deep bassy sounds, so huge explosions going off. It'll like do a little bit of a tap. The middle setting comes on more regularly, basically going up that frequency range, but still mainly on the deeper, lower frequencies. Then at level 3, this is very haptic, basically always on and pretty intensely. Now, if you've never used Hypersense, the max setting is not a subtle feeling. It is quite intense, and if you're into realism or immersion, then this can be quite enjoyable, as it really increases the intensity of the game. The most enjoyable sensation is in FPS games when using things like machine guns. It's just so punchy without being louder or hurting your ears. That being said, it's pretty awful when listening to music, so when you're in game, you're gonna wanna turn that music completely off. Now again, you can easily cycle through it going off or on, so if you do wanna switch between listening to music, that's not gonna be an issue. Now for me, the drivers on the Hypersenses are absolutely worth it. I wouldn't even make the haptics the only reason to get the Hypersenses, as you wouldn't be using this feature 90% of the time, or at least I wouldn't. Like, I probably wouldn't use it that much of the time, and if I was gonna use it, it'd probably be on a lower setting. But the one thing to mention before we move on is that Hypersense does not mean equalness. There are 3 headsets in the Razer lineup that have Hypersense, and the Kraken V3 Hypersense is the most intense and best implementation of their haptics. All the other ones will decrease in their intensity. Now as for controls on the Kraken V3 Hypersense, there is a mic mute button and a volume wheel, a detachable mic, and then on the right side, there is a button to change the intensity of those haptics. As for connectivity, this uses a non-detachable USB Type-A cable, which is the reason that it has the best haptics out of any of the headsets. Comfort here is the same on the V3s, absolutely no problem here, very comfortable. Now as far as mic quality, it sounds pretty much the same as like the V3s, but seems to have like an isolator on it. But overall, it doesn't really sound that great either with or without the isolator, but take a listen to the mic test of the Kraken V3 Hypersenses.
Check, check, check. This is the mic test of the Razer Kraken V3 Hypersense.
And that is how it sounds. As for compatibility, this is compatible with PC, Mac, and PlayStation. And moving on to the Kraken V3 Pro Hypersense, this is finishing it off with the Krakens, and this is the most premium Kraken V3 that you can buy. This comes in at a price tag of $199.99. The build quality here on the top of the line Kraken is identical to the V3 and the V3 Hypersenses, with the only change being a full leather top band. The V3 Hypersense's weight is about 345 grams, with the V3 Pro Hypersense weighing more due to obviously the battery, but it only weighs a little bit more at 371 grams, which is good. Now sound quality on the V3 Pro Hypersenses is very good, but not as good as the V3 Hypersense, or the non-pro wired variant. The EQ tuning is significantly different out of the box, having far less bass and a lower mids out of the box. This is a very bright sound profile, and while it is still very, very good, it does have that slight muddiness on the upper end of the frequency range due to it being wireless, that obviously the V3 Hypersense, because it's wired, does not have. So if you're looking for the absolute best sound quality, and that's the main thing you want, well, you're always gonna have to go with a wired headset, but that's true in this section as well. Now, obviously with the EQ tuning, this can definitely be tuned, and you can change all of that. That's just how it comes out of the box, but that is how it comes. Now, as far as game performance on the V3 Pros, it is very, very crisp. Great directional sound, but doesn't give you that fullness that the wired versions of the Hypersenses do. Still, again, you can change this, you can modify this. I did tune it, and it gives you relatively the same experience, but I am very particular with sound, so I would always probably lean to a wired variant. Still, it is very enjoyable to game on with great directional sound. However, the haptics here, while they are very good for a wired headset, they are not as good as the V3 Hypersenses that are wired. They're not as intense across the board, which makes sense for power consumption, but still probably more intense than you would want it. But the wired variant is very, very intense. It's like nauseatingly intense at some points. These maxed out are probably around or maybe a little bit more than the medium section of the wired versions. If you're buying these for the haptics, I would still say this is a great option. The one other headset that we're gonna go over, its haptics are not really that great, and they're not worth it for that reason alone. Now, as for controls, on the back of the left ear cup, there is a mic mute button, volume wheel, power button, 3.5mm jack, USB Type-C for charging, then a detachable mic. Then on the right side, there is a button to toggle between your different haptic settings. All of the controls are laid out basically perfectly, and I'm just really impressed with the overall like ergonomics of where the controls are. It's great and very, very easy to get to everything and understand what everything does. Now, as for connectivity, this is either wired with a 3.5mm cable or wireless with a 2.4 GHz USB dongle, and it charges via USB Type-C. Battery life does hit its claimed 44 hours of battery life without haptics or RGB on, but if you have both RGB and haptics on, this brings it down to only 11 hours, which makes absolute and total sense because those haptics, once you put it on your head, you can realize how much those motors are gonna be working. Now, comfort here is objectively the best on the list. The top band being made of that firmer but soft leather is perfect for balancing the weight of the heavier headset when compared to the V3 and the V3 Hypersense. The overall balance of this headset on your head is basically the perfect iteration of the Kraken V3 lineup. Very impressive and hyper comfortable. See what I did there? Now let's talk about the mic, because it's pretty bad, honestly. For the price that you pay, it's pretty muffled and it just doesn't sound great, especially when considering that Razer is capable of, well, a lot better than this, but don't take my word for it. Take a listen to the mic test.
Check, check, check. This is the mic test for the Razer Kraken V3 Pro Hypersense, a million other words.
And that is how it sounds. But as for compatibility, this is compatible with PC, Mac, PlayStation, Switch, and then Xbox and mobile with a wired connection. Take a listen to the back-to-back mic tests of all the headsets.
Check, check, check. This is the mic test of the Razer OG Kraken. Check, check, check. This is the mic test of the Razer Kraken V3 X. Check, check, check. This is the mic test of the Razer Kitty V2. Check, check, check. This is the mic test of the Razer Kraken V3. Check, check, check. This is the mic test of the Razer Kraken V3 Hypersense. Check, check, check. This is the mic test for the Razer Kraken V3 Pro Hypersense, a million other words.
Again, if you want to check out this exact same product, there's Amazon links below for the US, UK, Canada, and international links. And if you want to check out my main channel with longer form content, you can check that out right here. But this is a consumer tech review, high speed, and I'll see you guys in the next video.